Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Teresa Lanowitz, and I'm Chief Evangelist with LevelBlue. And today we have an exciting webcast in store. We're going to discuss the findings of our 2025 LevelBlue Futures Report. The title is Cyber Resilience and Business Impact. So let's jump right into looking at the findings. So first of all, why is this research so important to you? This research is vendor neutral, forward-looking, and actionable. And you should use it as a guidepost to take back to your own organizations and figure out where you are in relationship to your peers who have participated in this survey for us. So understand, are you thinking along the same lines? Are you able to remediate in the same ways? Are you building a culture of cyber resilience? Are you making sure that cybersecurity is a business requirement? So listen to the data we have here. Take the data back to your own organization, use this as a guidepost. And as a thank you for attending this webcast, you'll all get a copy of our 2025 Futures Report, Cyber Resilience and Business Impact. Just a little bit about the research. We went off in January of 2025 and surveyed 1,500 people from across 16 different countries. So this is truly a global survey. And we looked at 7 different industries: financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, utilities, transportation, and U.S. state, local, and higher education or SLED. And we talked to senior executives -1, senior executives -2. So the people in the organization who have the decision-making power and who can form culture and who can make change inside of an organization. Now, you've heard me say the word cyber resilience a couple of times, but just a quick alignment on how we're using that definition. Cyber resilience means how the entire organization coalesces together when something happens to the IT estate. It could be some type of cybersecurity attack. It could be a man-made event, or it could be a natural disaster: fire, earthquake, hurricane, flood, and so on. And that really means how that entire organization comes together to make sure the business can still operate when that entire IT estate has had something unforeseen happen to it. So think about it in a very simple way. If you're a hospital and your entire IT estate goes down, can you still admit people? Can you admit them through paper forms? Do you have those paper forms? Do you even have the paper to print out the forms if you needed them? So can you still sustain business when something unforeseen happens? And then we'll take a look also at cyber resilient organizations. And these cyber resilient organizations have very defining characteristics that we'll talk about here. And cyber resilient organizations, as we've found, they work much better with trusted third-party advisors. They're able to bring in outside help when necessary. And they're also not as susceptible to breaches. So we'll talk a little bit about those characteristics in another slide or so. But first up on the agenda, we'll go through our findings of the report and take a look at why cyber resilience is really related to business and helps to build that business confidence, and also what the business impact is. We'll take a look at some of these evolving attack vectors. What types of attacks are organizations really thinking about? Are they prepared to remediate against those attacks? And what type of emerging types of attacks are we seeing? And then what is going on with the software supply chain? The software supply chain has been in the news quite a bit lately, with attacks from around the world, as well as letters going out to suppliers of supply chain. So we'll take a look at that software supply chain, what that means, and then how to build that proactive culture to become cyber resilience. So let's start with our key findings. And what we found is that cyber resilience really does build business confidence, and cyber resilience is being elevated to that C-suite agenda. And we have the empirical evidence to back this up. And the way we read this particular slide is this is a year-over-year comparison between 2024 and 2025. As I mentioned, we surveyed 1,500 people from across 16 different countries in 2025. And these are the things that we believe would be impacting cyber resilience, the barriers to cyber resilience in an organization. So the gray bar is our data from 2024, and the blue bar is our data from 2025. So we're seeing a marked improvement here. So if you take a look, there are 3 or 4 big characteristics that are really critical. In 2024, we found that 73% of organizations did not see cyber resilience as a whole organization priority. In 2025, that number dropped to 55%. That is still a high number, but it's markedly lower, 18% lower than what we saw in 2024. So we can think about what happened in 2024 that would cause an organization to say, you know what, we need to be more resilient. It's a whole organization issue. It's not just the cybersecurity team. Just because something has cyber in front of it does not mean that it is only owned by the cybersecurity team. We need to make sure that our network team, our application development team, our PR team, our legal team, any outside suppliers that we have, we need to make sure that they're all part of this. And that becomes a whole organizational issue. We also saw in 2024 that governance teams, 71% of governance teams, those teams kind of making the rules of an organization, they did not understand cyber resilience. That number, again, dropped to 55% in 2025. Again, still a very high number, but we're making significant progress at a pretty fast rate. And our executive leadership in 2024, 63% said that they do not prioritize cyber resilience, meaning they believe that if there is some type of cyber resilient type of activity required, it's the cybersecurity team that remediates, versus prioritizing this idea of the whole organization. And that number dropped to 50% in 2025. So again, we're seeing marked differences in how an organization thinks about cyber resilience, how they think about bringing together the entire organization in the event that your IT estate is impacted from either some type of cybersecurity event, a man-made event, or some type of natural disaster. So this is really great. So this is, again, this is a great chart to take back to your own organization and understand how your organization looks at cyber resilience. Who's responsible for it? Are you funding it? Are your executives on board with cyber resilience? Is it a whole organization priority, and so on? And what we also found out, and this is through our data analysis, we found that 7% of our total survey participants really were able to identify as cyber resilient organizations. And they have 5 common characteristics. The first characteristic is that they have aligned security with business goals. So they're aligning their cybersecurity team and their line of business, understanding what the critical few objectives of the business are, and making sure that cybersecurity is aligned with supporting those critical few business objectives. This also means that they're funding cybersecurity at a project level from the beginning of every project. They're not waiting for something catastrophic to happen to fund cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is part and parcel of every initiative that's going on. And that's the alignment of security with your business goals and the line of business. These cyber resilient organizations are also able to defend against AI-powered attacks. We know AI can provide size, scale, scope, and speed of attacks. These cyber resilient organizations are ready to remediate against AI-driven attacks. And on the flip side, they're also using AI inside of their own organization to make cybersecurity better. They're using generative AI possibly for reporting. They're using machine learning for pattern identification. They're using deep learning or neural networks for identifying predictive analysis and what's going to happen versus what has happened or what has happened in the past. So those are 3 of the top characteristics. The 4th characteristic is that they're prepared for new types of threats, new types of attacks against the organization. That includes AI-driven attacks, but it also includes deep fakes, things like quishing, smishing, things that we have not seen as big attacks in the past. They're really prepared for those new types of attacks. And then finally, the denouement of all of this, the conclusion of all of this, is that cyber resilient organizations have not experienced a breach in the past 12 months. So they're very good at preventing breaches. They're very good at understanding what's going on inside of their organization, what's going on with their intellectual property, making sure that they're protecting their intellectual property, and also working with suppliers throughout their supply chain. And we'll talk a little bit more about supply chain later on, but these are the characteristics of cyber resilient organizations. And again, take this back to your own organization and ask yourself how well prepared you are for each of these types of characteristics. And this will give you an idea of where you need to work in terms of becoming more cyber resilient, or if you are cyber resilient. And we also know that cyber resilient organizations, they are more proactive, confident, and intentional with what they do with cybersecurity. Non-cyber resilient organizations are more reactive and transactional. Something happens, they then rush to fix it. They may have an attack. They may have some type of, let's say they had a ransomware attack, so suddenly they will do a bunch of training on ransomware. They'll be very reactive in how they're working. They may have an adversary get in because they weren't using multi-factor authentication. They will then move to implement multi-factor authentication everywhere versus being proactive, confident, and intentional. And we see these cyber resilient organizations, they're investing significantly in advanced threat detection and response, which is great. They're bringing in these trusted third-party providers to help them. And they're investing in software supply chain. This is one of the biggest areas where cyber resilient organizations stand out. 94% of them are investing in software supply chain security versus 62% of the overall survey population. So 32% difference between investing in software supply chain security. And when we talk about software supply chain security, you'll see how that has a tremendous impact later on. But we also know that cyber resilient organizations, they can innovate more because they are taking a more adaptive approach to cybersecurity. They're bringing in trusted third-party advisors where appropriate. They are aligned with the line of business. The leaders carry KPIs attached to cybersecurity. So that means that innovation can occur more and more quickly inside of these cyber resilient organizations. Now, what's the impact of cyber resilience, and how are we really aligning cybersecurity with strategic business goals? We wanted to find out where the leadership agenda was really focused. And so we asked, which of the following will be a priority for your organization over the next 12 months? Now, you take a look at these top three here. 41% say they want to implement technologies, processes, or procedures. So they're looking at making sure they are really bolstered and fortified against being able to make sure that their organization, their intellectual property, their assets are really protected. 38% said they are aligning cybersecurity with the business. That's one of their top priorities, to align cybersecurity with the line of business. And 37% say they want to increase boardroom engagement. So again, take this back to your organization. Where do you fit with each of these priorities? What is a priority for your organization? How do you compare against your peers who are participating in this particular survey? We also wanted to find out about organizational competence. And we found that 61% said that their organization was competent in terms of cyber resilience. And again, think about those numbers I showed on the very first slide, where we've seen a tremendous year-over-year increase in how cyber resilience is actually looked at inside of the organization. And a lot of that came from incidents that happened in 2024, things we had to protect against, things that we look at and when they're now historical, but we look at them during our planning cycle and we say, we want to be prepared for something such as this. And then 61% said their organization had competence in cybersecurity. 60% said they had really good alignment between cybersecurity and the line of business, but 51% said they had, only 51% said they had visibility of the software supply chain. So they're not really sure what's going on in their software supply chain. And we know that is a big, big issue. And that's one of the big issues emerging in 2025. We also know that cybersecurity is a business requirement. And we've known this for many years now. Cybersecurity is no longer just about really smart people sitting together in a room and reading logs. Cybersecurity is a business requirement. It's not a technical problem. It is something that is baked into the business. It's a business requirement. And the way we really read these bar charts is the darker blue, that is the overall survey population, and the ice blue, the lighter blue, those are our cyber resilient organizations. So effectively aligning business risk appetite with cybersecurity risk management, 57% of our cyber resilient organizations do that, as opposed to only 43% of the general population of the survey. So this idea of aligning business risk appetite and cybersecurity risk management, that's critical for a business requirement. We allocate cybersecurity budget to every project from the beginning. 61% of our cyber resilient organizations allocate cybersecurity budget to every project from the beginning, as opposed to 46% of our non-cyber resilient organizations. So think about this, and think about this in your own organization. Where are you allocating budget? Are you saying we're going to go ahead, go forward with this project, we're going to innovate, but we're not necessarily bringing in a cybersecurity team or looking at cybersecurity requirements? Or are you saying, you know what, it's too difficult to modify for cybersecurity once we start building the requirements for a project, once we start developing software for the project, once we start setting our infrastructure for the project? So making sure that you're allocating that cybersecurity budget from the beginning is really critical. And 79% of our cyber resilient organizations say that they can risk more with innovation because they take an adaptive approach to cybersecurity, as opposed to 61% of our non-cyber resilient organizations. So this idea of innovating, the idea of driving better business outcomes, the idea of your CTO, your chief technology officer, is going to say, let's use these IoT types of devices possibly to collect data to give us better outcomes in business. So there's the idea of innovation, the idea of being able to say, let's share APIs, let's use APIs. They're able to risk more because they're taking that adaptive approach to cybersecurity. So this is how cyber resilient organizations think of cybersecurity as a business requirement versus non-cyber resilient organizations. Again, take this back to your organization and see where you fit in. Now, let's take a look at AI. This is something that is on everybody's mind. We know AI is a game changer. It's probably the biggest technological innovation that we'll see in our lifetimes. AI allows for tremendous size, scale, speed, scope for us. But on the opposite side of that coin are our cyber adversaries. And those cyber adversaries have access to the same tools, to the same type of environments that we have access to. So they can use those AI tools to execute attacks. And think about some of the things that we're now seeing with AI. We're seeing large language models start to hallucinate. We're seeing more AI-driven attacks, and the adversary can do that at such tremendous speed once they figure out how to do things. These large language models hallucinating lead to things such as slop squatting, typo squatting, and so on. And so we know that AI is disruptive from a technology perspective, but it is also a disruptive force for those cyber adversaries. And we know that AI is driving incredibly sophisticated attacks. And what we see here is that this idea of deepfakes, the idea of taking somebody's voice, somebody's image, and creating a deepfake attack with that voice and image, or taking some type of synthetic idea where you cobble together an ID based upon a real person and something that you're making up, or these non-human identity attacks. 59% of organizations say it's becoming far more difficult for their employees to discern real from not real, or real from fake. And 44% of organizations say that deepfake and synthetic identity attacks are likely to occur in their organizations. And only 32% of organizations say that they're prepared for deepfake and synthetic identity attacks. So most organizations think they're going to happen. Most organizations know there is a problem with these deep fake types of attacks, and only 32% are really ready and aware and capable of defending against and remediating against. So this presents an opportunity. This presents an opportunity for you to do better inside of your organization to be prepared for these types of attacks. And one of the questions that we like to ask in our research every year, year over year, is what type of attack do you think you're going to experience over the next 12 months? Ransomware came in at the #1 spot again, with 60% of our survey participants saying they believe they will be hit with ransomware in the next 12 months, followed closely by phishing and business email compromise at 51%. So these are the traditional types of attacks that we're seeing: ransomware, phishing, business email compromise, personal information exfiltration, insider threat, account takeover, DDoS, nation state attacks. And DDoS comes in at 38%. So 38% of our survey participants said, yes, they think a DDoS attack is going to occur in the next 12 months. But only 38% are prepared to defend against those DDoS attacks. So take this back to your organization. What type of attacks do you think you might be hit with in the next 12 months? It often goes according to industry, or if your peers have been attacked, if your peers, your competitors maybe have experienced some type of attack. The adversary may be going out after a specific sort of industry vertical and so on. But only 38% of organizations say that they are prepared to defend against a good old-fashioned DDoS attack. So where do you line up in that? We then also wanted to find out about these emerging types of attacks that organizations are seeing. Things such as quishing, scanning QR codes and inputting personally identifiable information or personal health information on a QR code. Things such as software supply chain attacks, which we're seeing more and more of in 2025. Smishing, deep fake and synthetic identity attacks, AI-powered attacks, brute force attacks, which again are becoming quite popular. So these are these emerging types of attacks. They're not new, but they are emerging. This is what people are seeing in terms of the emerging attacks. But this is a startling number. Only 29% say that their organization is prepared for AI-powered attacks, and 42% believe they're likely. So 29% saying, yeah, we're not really, we're prepared to defend against that. That means that there's 71% of organizations are not prepared to defend against these AI attacks. And these AI attacks, because of the tooling that the adversary can use, can happen very quickly at scale and at speed. So I wanted to find out from you, is your team prepared for AI-driven cyber attacks? So we have a little poll here. So how's your team thinking about AI-driven cyber attacks? Are you prepared? Did you start thinking about this a couple of years ago when generative AI was becoming quite popular? So please take a look and cast your vote. Yes, you're prepared for AI-driven attacks. No, you're not prepared for AI-driven attacks. Or you're not sure about your preparedness for AI-driven cyber attacks. So think about what these AI-driven cyber attacks can do. They can be in the form of generative AI through really great ransomware or really great phishing types of emails. They're no longer coming from a prince who says, give me your bank number and I'll deposit my worldly goods, my worldly fortunes into your bank account and you'll have it by tomorrow. They're very legitimate. They're coming from all angles. They're coming through email. They're coming through text. So these AI-driven attacks through generative AI are becoming quite popular. So how is your team prepared for these AI-driven type of cyber attacks? Please cast your vote. Okay, it looks like we have a pretty good number of our attendees who have cast their vote. And wow, this is great. So 43.8, almost 44% of you are saying that, yes, you're prepared for those AI-driven cyber attacks. Well done to be prepared and to really be kind of taking a look to the future and understanding that the generative AI changed the way phishing attacks can happen. 31%, 31.3% said no, they're not prepared, and 25% are not really sure. So if you're not sure, go back to your start the conversation in your organization about how prepared you are for AI-driven cyber attacks. And if you are prepared, congratulations and well done. So thanks for participating in the poll. And what we also wanted to find out is, where are organizations investing? So to what extent is your organization investing to prepare for emerging types of cyber attacks? And this was a pleasant surprise to me that 69% came back and said that they are investing in application security, because they know that application security is going to be really based upon how these attacks are going to occur. They're going to come in possibly through the software supply chain. You have a third-party supplier that might be delivering something through, you're integrating with their APIs. Organizations are looking at application security. They're looking at application security because they do not want those applications to be compromised. They want to make sure those applications are solid, that there's not some type of known vulnerability that an adversary can exploit easily. They want to make sure that they're not going to give way to living off the land type of attacks, where a known vulnerability can be exploited as long as the adversary gains access to your network. So take this back to your own organization and figure out where you're investing. And we do have a question that came in, and I'm about to answer the question in this particular slide. But CD wants to know, if you are a cyber resilient organization, how are you thinking a little bit differently from those non-cyber resilient organizations? And this is this slide is the perfect answer to that. You can see here that these cyber resilient organizations, they're very much in concert. They're working in concert with trusted third-party providers. They're bringing in incident response specialists. And the way we read this particular slide is the darker blue. These are the non-cyber resilient organizations, and the light blue, or the ice blue, those are the cyber resilient organizations. So you can take a look down this bar chart, this horizontal bar chart, and see that for every single one of these types of external experts, the cyber resilient organizations are outpacing the non-cyber resilient organizations. So what these cyber resilient organizations are doing, because they are aligned with the line of business, they're saying, we need to make sure that we're working with these trusted third-party advisors. And this is a big, big difference between cyber resilient organizations and non-cyber resilient organizations. Cyber resilient organizations, they understand the need for incident response. And one of the stats I have later in this deck is that only 37% of organizations have an official codified incident response plan. So most organizations, they're figuring out their incident response while they are in the heat of the moment, while they are under attack, while they are having that incident that they have to respond to and be able to mitigate and remediate. So bringing in these incident response specialists to help you have a proactive incident response plan, so that when you do have some type of unforeseen event, that incident response plan goes into play right away. They're bringing in threat intelligence providers. They're working with good, solid threat intelligence on a regular basis. They might be bringing in legal experts for help on an attack or some type of breach. They're bringing in these external third-party advisors for training and awareness. And again, with these emerging types of attacks that are largely driven by AI, a whole lot more. I think over the past several years, since 2021, as an industry, we've done really well at making sure people understand what ransomware is, making sure they're not clicking on suspicious URLs. But now we have these AI-generated attacks that can operate at speed and scale. And so they're bringing in training and awareness experts to help with that. That's that human side of cybersecurity, that human element, making sure that we are not, we are the weakest link, but making sure that that weakest link is not something that is susceptible to being exposed. So again, the cyber resilient organizations are bringing in these trusted third-party advisors. And now let's take a look at the software supply chain. We've been talking about the software supply chain. We know that there's very little visibility into the software supply chain. And these threat actors are entering in through software supply chain vulnerabilities. All they have to do is find one vulnerability, perhaps in an API that is used across multiple companies, and the adversary is in. So we found that only 49% of organizations have low to moderate visibility into their software supply chain. So there's not very good visibility into that software supply chain. And what we wanted to find out is what are the most important factors driving a need for better software supply chain visibility within your organization. And what we found out is, and this is items number 3, 4, and 5, only 29% say that they want to have visibility into the software supply chain so that they can identify third-party ingredients in the source code. Think about where your source code is coming from. You're probably getting some from open source repositories. You're probably building some internally. You may have global systems integrators building some. You may have some that's coming from software that is decades old inside of your organization. You may have local sort of code developers helping you. So you're bringing your software from a variety of different places, but only 29% of our survey participants said that they want to identify third-party ingredients in the source code. So you should really understand where your software is coming from and who has developed that software. And that goes hand in hand with the SBOM, or the software bill of materials. And only 27% of our survey participants said that they are interested in having visibility in the supply chain so that they can complete their SBOM, or their software bill of materials. Software bill of materials is critical, so you understand where your software is coming from, who wrote that software, what components of your software was written by what third-party type of vendor that you might be using. And only 29% said that they want to know where the vulnerabilities are in their source code. So you need to understand where those vulnerabilities are. What risk are those vulnerabilities to you? What type of risk acceptance do you have of those vulnerabilities? So software supply chain visibility is something that we need to work on tremendously. And we're seeing this in 2025 with some of the attacks that we're seeing against the software supply chain. And we did come away from this with our analysis and think the software supply chain is definitely a weak link. Only 25% of our survey participants said that they're going out and engaging with their suppliers, whether it be commercial off-the-shelf suppliers, internal suppliers, global systems integrators that they might be working with, understanding what they're getting from an open source repository. Only 25% said they're going off and looking at the security of those software suppliers that they're using in their software supply chain. So the software supply chain is definitely a weak link, and we see that adversaries are identifying that weak link and they're executing attacks against it in 2025. We also wanted to find out where cyber resilient organizations were in the software supply chain. And if we take a look at this vertical bar chart, the dark blue, those are the non-cyber resilient organizations. The lighter blue, or the ice blue, those are the cyber resilient organizations. We see that cyber resilient organizations are far more holistic in how they look at things. One of the biggest things here is that on the far right side, we see that cyber resilient organizations, 26% of them, understand the implication of a failed patch release as opposed to a non-cyber resilient organization. So if you have a failed patch release, what does that mean? Can you go back and conduct cyber forensics and understand why that patch release might be failing? And 28% of cyber resilient organizations conduct cyber forensics on a regular basis. And 34% of cyber resilient organizations can assign or create a confidence level of their third-party suppliers. And this is something that's incredibly important in the software supply chain, to be able to attach a confidence level of your third-party suppliers. And how do we build a proactive culture to make sure that we're aligned with cybersecurity being a business requirement and that everybody has responsibility for cybersecurity? It's this idea of building a culture of cybersecurity. And again, this is our non-cyber resilient organizations are the dark blue, cyber resilient organizations are the light blue. The cybersecurity team is aligned with the line of business. 100% of our cyber resilient organizations have their cybersecurity team and their line of business team aligned. This means they're budgeting. They're understanding the critical few objectives of the line of business. They're making sure that cybersecurity investments are going to support the innovation of the business. So that alignment with the line of business helps to build that culture of cybersecurity. And then the middle one, 73% of our cyber resilient organizations have KPIs associated with cybersecurity for their leaders, and as opposed to 60% of the non-cyber resilient organizations. This is critical. This is a critical piece of information here, and take it back to your own organization and understand, does your leadership team have KPIs associated with cybersecurity assigned to them? Because if you don't have the KPI assigned to you, you're probably not going to think first and foremost about cybersecurity. So building out that culture of cybersecurity, you want to have that alignment. And then the final one, educating the workforce about social engineering tactics. This is where a lot of these AI-driven attacks are going to come in, is through social engineering. 83% of our cyber resilient organizations, compared to 62% of non-cyber resilient organizations, are really educating the workforce about social engineering tactics. And while we are doing so much better in 2025 than we were in 2024, in terms of building a cybersecurity culture, making sure cybersecurity is thought of, alignment with the line of business, we're focused on a cyber resilient organization, there's still a lot of room for improvement. And two of the biggest things I'd like to call out on this particular chart is that only 37% of organizations surveyed say that they have a business continuity and incident response plan that is effective. So only 37% have that codified incident response plan. That's a big, big gap that every organization can really work to overcome. And it didn't go up that much this year. Last year, we were at 35% of organizations having a codified incident response plan. This year, we're only at 37% of organizations having a codified incident response plan. So that leaves a lot of room for improvement. Hopefully, we see that get better in 2026. And the other thing on here that is startling is that only 34% of organizations do their due diligence on cybersecurity during mergers and acquisition phase. So think about your own organization. Have you been involved in any mergers and acquisitions? Are you the acquiring company? Did you do your due diligence on the company you were acquiring with respect to cybersecurity? How many times have they been breached? How many incidents did they have to remediate? How are they really defending against the basic types of attacks that we discussed, as well as against some of the emerging types of attacks that we discussed? So making sure that cybersecurity is part of the overall due diligence for mergers and acquisitions is a really important step. And now, how do you become cyber resilient? There are 4 main steps that you can take to become cyber resilient. Elevate cyber resilience in your organization. Make sure everybody in your organization understands what cyber resilience is, why it's so important for the whole organization to be involved when something that impacts your entire IT estate, whether it be a cyber incident, a man-made incident, or some type of natural disaster. Why should you really focus on this idea of cyber resilience, of getting the business back up and running while you are really repairing that IT estate? Foster that cyber resilient organization. Really have that culture that says cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility, because just because the word cyber is in front of it for cyber resilience doesn't mean that only the cybersecurity team is going to remediate and fix this problem when we do have it. Be proactive and intentional with what you're doing from a cybersecurity perspective versus reactive and transactional. Yes, make sure that if your competitor is breached and you understand why your competitor was breached, make sure you have those things in play, but be more prepared than that. Align with your line of business. Understand what the critical few business objectives are. Bring in those trusted third-party advisors, just as the cyber resilient organizations are doing. And then prioritize the software supply chain. That software supply chain, make sure you have visibility. Make sure you understand where your software is coming from, who wrote it, what the vulnerabilities are. Can you conduct cyber forensics? Do you understand the implication of a failed patch release? Make sure that you can prioritize software supply chain resistance in your organization. Following these 4 steps will get you much, much closer to being a cyber resilient organization. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience today. And again, as a thank you, you'll all receive a copy of the LevelBlue 2025 Futures Report. And please do visit us at levelblue.com/futures report. And thank you again for joining us today. You've been a wonderful audience.